Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here, and this may be the most important interview I've ever done or ever will do. Those that have followed my work for well over a decade now know that the Epstein case is one that I have been following and doing my best to expose because it illustrates how the predator class and their minions are above the law and do the most horrific things imaginable to children. And that's why when Maria Farmer agreed to come on the program, I was just ecstatic. I want to thank her so much for joining me.
Thank you.
No, thank you. And before we even get going, you wanted to show the audience this piece of art.
Because I'm a little weak and so I'm not feeling well, but I want to show them something that I made, which is basically my illustration for the FBI. And it shows all these perpetrators, and it's based on Bosch, a painting, from long ago in the 1500s. It's based on a painting he did called the Garden of Earthly Delights. But I did it more like from a child's eye so that, children would see heaven on top and hell on the bottom and earth in the middle. So this is what I did, and I'm going to walk you through it. This is Gloria Allred, and here, let's see if you can see her.
There you go. Yeah, great.
She's really like Satan, okay? And then you have up here Jeffrey Epstein. He's in a little UFO stuck on a NASA tower. But I'm just going to walk you through this slowly. And you can see some of the perpetrators. And Alan Dershowitz, he's not wearing his underpants, Alan Dershowitz. And the lawyers, okay? Here's, can you see Abigail Wexner?
Oh, I can.
Okay. And the head of the snake here, you see him?
Yes, and Ghislaine Maxwell right behind.
Yeah, Ghislaine. We have some other really big heroes here. And then we have some really gross co-conspirators. Just going to go through those.
Is that Bezos down there?
Elon Musk. What a piece of crap. Look at him. Oh, how funny. And then here you have Donald Trump, Sarah Kellen. For some reason, something weird came up on my screen, so... I don't know what that is. Okay, so anyway, I hope you can see it all.
Everything's looking great.
I made him a very little man, Donald Trump. I'm going to tell you why. I met him with Jeffrey Epstein, and this man, Bill Clinton, came to visit Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein at the estate. This is someone who doesn't count. And so anyway, we just have some, an illustration for the FBI, because apparently they can't follow verbal cues. So I wanted to help them a little bit.
Yeah, they can't follow evidence, names, numbers, associates, time frames. All those things seem to be void when it comes into an investigation of their overlords.
Right.
And I mean, all right. Again, this one we're going to kind of just jump off the wall on. There's a lot of new Epstein news. Hopefully we're going to go over that as well. But before we even get going, guys, I've been fully demonetized on YouTube. Thank you for supporting me. But more importantly, Maria is right now battling cancer. And Virginia Giuffre Roberts actually put together this GoFundMe. I, of course, have donated it. Every little bit counts. We all know somebody who's been affected by cancer. We know what that battle is like. And for her to make time during this very, very hard time in her lives to not only talk to me, but hopefully talk to the world and tell not only this audience, but your friends and families after we do this interview what actually happened and how this has been going on well before Maria Farmer, well before Jeffrey Epstein.
Well before me. Yeah.
And Jeffrey Epstein, although a horrific man, was a facilitator for others on so many levels. So before we even get into Epstein, you're an artist. That's how you get involved.
I wanted to ask you one thing too.
Sure.
To mention, actually the most important thing to me is this petition, because the woman who introduced me to them and forced them into my life is Eileen Guggenheim, and she's the president of the board still of the New York Academy of Art, which is my alma mater, and it's where it's why my assault occurred. This woman. So I just feel like it's really important that people sign this. We only need 5,000 signatures.
So we're going to be sharing that on Twitter, and then I'm going to be putting that into the description after the fact on this video. But not only were you a victim of this man, but your sister was a victim. And this all started in the fact that you were trying to get into the art world. So, Maria, before we even get into that, how do you get into the New York Academy of Art? You know, what like for instance, what did you think you were going to do? Because I thought I was going to go to the Art Institute of Philadelphia. I thought I'd end up being an
Oh,
animator. Yeah, I mean, back in the day when all you had was drawing and painting before
right.
Photoshop and
That's
all
cool.
that, I
Yeah.
thought maybe I would animate The Simpsons or something like that. And then as I went through and I learned this, obviously I've kind of turned to documentary films, broadcasting, etc. But a lot of that is being able to have visual images. So what made you gravitate to the art world in the first place?
Okay, so I was born an artist. I just see things differently, and I've always been this way. I'm not like most people. I don't know how to explain it, but when I meet fellow artists like Eric Fischel, it's like we speak the same language. And like this friend Lucy Winton, and when we talk, we just communicate because she's also an artist. It's hard to explain, but it's something. It's who you are. And the weird thing about all these victims and survivors, the survivors at least, is that they were all really super creative. Most of them were artists, of different kinds of artists, like fashion designers or just whatever they were doing. They did really well, and it's just very upsetting. I was going to say that the night I was forced to meet them because I was graduating from the New York Academy of Arts, and the dean of students, Eileen Guggenheim, came up to me. It was the night we were all having our show, and so everybody would have one painting, pretty much, and I had three because I did a triptych because I wanted to make enough money to like be able to pay back, some loans and survive. And so I figured I would sell these that night, and I did. I sold all three. And instead of like nurturing me and being proud of me like a normal dean would think, because I was the only one who sold anything, by the way. I bought something. I bought a painting from another girl. She was super talented, but nobody else sold anything. And so you would think she'd go, wow, this is very marketable. I should help Maria with her career. And instead she leveraged it against me.
Very, very odd. Now, were you originally from New York and then got into
No,
the New York Academy
no.
of Art? Where are you from
Yeah.
originally?
So I've always, just so you know, I was looking through journals for all this. And one of the things is like from the third grade, and I'm like, I have the power to be a famous artist. It was just weird. I always had this thing where I just see these pictures. I'm sorry, this is my phone. I see pictures in my head, and then I can just translate them. And it's such like something I'm borrowing, from a higher source. It's definitely from God, and I'm just like a conduit, and I'm really grateful for it. But I had to give that up for 20 years because of trauma, and it definitely did its damage,
So
not
so
doing
let's
the thing I
begin
was
that
supposed
journey.
to do, which is what they took from all the survivors. They took what we were supposed to do from us. And then you have all these rich people sitting around at like Harvard, just yucking it up still. They're disgusting, okay? They're disgusting.
Couldn't agree more. So let's get on this journey.
Okay.
You're there. You're at Guggenheim. You get, and by the way, that woman you're saying is a fake Guggenheim, right? She
Yeah,
isn't
she's
even
not even
really.
a real Guggenheim. Like maybe her family is named Guggenheim, maybe, I don't know. But she and her sister use it to insinuate that they're the art family. They've always done this. And there was an article that came out in Vanity Fair while I was in graduate school, I think in 95, maybe 94 or 96, I'm not sure. But I think it was 1995. And it talked about the fact that they're not those Guggenheims, right? But she kept that article pretty secret. Like I didn't know about it while I worked for her.
Well, people often use, I guess, a facade to leverage themselves. That's what all these social climbers are. And even, those who want to make it in the art and fashion world that have that belief, want to know people who know people that can put them in situations that are good for their career. And obviously, that's why you took this job for Jeffrey Epstein as what you thought would be his private artist, correct?
Yes, yes. Well, no, actually, I took the job because, okay, so let me go back just to explain how evil Eileen Guggenheim is, actually. And that is my opinion, that she's pure evil. And I have the right to that opinion. So I'm just telling her. But anyway, she had, before she introduced me to them, she had asked me when I was visiting home one day in Arizona. She called me and said she wanted me to take this call from this man, Cy Twombly. He was going to be calling me. I'd never heard of him. He's an artist. And she's like, Cy Twombly's going to call you, and he wants you to be his concubine. And like my sister and I have been discussing it, and we think you'd be a perfect candidate. And you could move to London, and you'd have a really good life. And I was like, what is this? I just so weird. So I hang up and he calls me and he's like, hey, Eileen Guggenheim, Faux Guggenheim said you would be my life partner. And, this is what we want from you. And, you're going to come here and live in London. And I'm like, no, I'm not. And I hung up on him. Yeah.
Like your concubine. What, like, is it the 15th century when you hear something like that?
Right.
Like, do you
Right.
take a double take and do you say, what do you mean by concubine?
Yeah, it was just so creepy. And I thought, well, she has no respect for me, clearly. And I was very hurt by this because I had so much respect for her. And I thought that she was this honorable person, even though she was abusive to me. And now when I look back at it, I realize she abused me the whole time. She abused me the whole time, mentally, psychologically, verbally. Yeah. And so anyway, she used me as like a servant at her house. And sometimes she paid me minimum wage and sometimes she didn't pay me. So that was a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because I was a student at her school. So that's really unethical. And I want people to think about that because students are going to go there and they're not going to be old enough to maybe understand what's happening. So.
And also in one of the most
dangerous.
expensive places to live in the world. I mean, New York City, even then, was ridiculously expensive to live in. And I think that that's another leverage point a lot of these guys use against young women who are there to be in the art or modeling world. You know what I mean? I mean, how do you pay the rent? And you saw that even with it was either in the 80s or 90s, mainstream piece on Claude Hadid and Jean-Luc Brunel. They were talking about how many of these girls were pitted against each other. They were taken away from their families. They were flown to France. They're between 14 and 16 years of age. They're all, 4 to 6 of them living in an apartment, all trying to get that next job. And like you said, a lot of them are going to gravitate towards their abusers because that's how it works. Bella Thorne is one of those people. She's the Hollywood actress that grew up Disney, Nickelodeon, and she thought she was in a real relationship with one of her abusers, until she was a teenager. I mean, this is a girl that was abused from 6 to 14. I mean, from the time
that happened with Epstein, there were a couple of them that were in love with him. They thought they were in a relationship with him. It's just so heartbreaking. But the worst part about this, Jason, the worst thing about this whole thing has been the FBI. The absolute worst part of it. Because when I called them, they were very dismissive. They knew I was telling the truth, but they were dismissive. And then they were like, okay, don't tell anybody. So, of course, what am I going to do? Like the FBI doesn't. And I said, well, should I call these other agencies that are involved? Like it took place in several states. And I don't remember which ones I called, but I did call others. And so the FBI is well aware of my call. And so they came to me 10 years later. This part drives me crazy when they're like, well, maybe they didn't actually get your call, Maria. Are you sure? I promise you, they got my call because they came to me 10 years later. And when they came to the door, I'm hiding in North Carolina in the woods. And they are like, hi, Maria, whatever. And I said, is this about my student loans? Like, I thought they were there to arrest me because I hadn't paid my student loans because I'm broke, because I'm in hiding from Ghislaine. And they never offered me witness protection. I asked for it and I did not get it. And listen, they came to ask me and my sister to testify in Florida. And the woman who came was a superhero. Her name's Nesbitt Kirkendall. She's like boots on the ground hero, right? But the people on top wouldn't let her succeed. And so they did the sweetheart deal. Yeah.
Yeah, and that is the point because the general public really wasn't much aware of the Epstein case probably until just prior to the Trump election, right? There were whispers. That's one of the reasons they got behind him, because when Hannity asked Trump about Bill Clinton, he said, well, he's a nice guy, but he's got some problems with his friend Jeffrey Epstein. And that would snowball. And now you had different congressmen, some senators whispering about it. And thank goodness they finally said something. But as this was going on, Virginia Giuffre Roberts was doing all she could to bring it back into the light. There had been this ongoing court battle.
Courtney's been working on it the whole time.
Yeah, and Bradley Edwards,
And Brad's a hero. Brad's a hero. I want to make this really clear. I want to say something.
Sure.
Julie Brown is not a hero. Julie Brown wants everyone in the world to believe she's a hero. And she goes on the cover of People and she wins an award. And the thing is, maybe she brought some attention to this case, not necessarily any more than Brad would have brought with his notes that she used, but maybe she brought attention to it, and that's great. But she has been very much about Julie and the accolades of it. And I have a bad taste in my mouth with anyone who uses these victims or any any part of this to benefit in a way that is just on the backs of victims. You know, it's like, are you kidding me? Yeah. So she made him like over $1 million, and she went to renegotiate her book deal. She was supposed to interview my sister and I here, and she flew on to New York because he had been arrested. So she wanted to be on TV. So she never bothered then to come to us, because then she had her book deal. Because Berman, I think it was a setup between them. This is my opinion. Because he's sitting there giving her credit for this arrest. He points to his poster and he says, we didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, my gosh, if it hadn't been for that hero, Julie Berman, and the Miami Herald, we wouldn't have even known. But the thing is, I called, that's the FBI office that the NYPD gave me. That's the Southern District of New York. Yeah. You know, they've known.
Very corrupt, by the way.
24 years at that point. They'd known for 24 years. And they knew all of it. It's not like they knew everything in the illustration, okay? They've known the whole time. And I listed everybody that was coming and going. It's not like I was like vague or something. I'm a very talkative person. I'm a very articulate person. I'm sick right now and I'm able to still articulate this 25 years later. At the time, I was as sharp as a tack. And I was like, this is what's been happening. I also told them very specifically, both my sister and I had been trafficked at that point. This is in 1996. I didn't know the word trafficked. I said we were stolen and kidnapped and held captive. So I didn't know about trafficking. But I also said they've stolen the photographs out of my work stuff of my sisters who were 12 and 15 in these pictures. And these are compromised pictures. And I was panicked. It's why I stopped painting for 20 years. It was so painful to me that they took these pictures that I was using for anatomy and for my arts, for my projects. And the FBI did not want those envelopes that they'd taken those pictures from. The FBI also denied me witness protection twice. And I've been in hiding this whole time, and they won't get Ghislaine Maxwell. And they know where she is. That's the other thing that's very upsetting to me, Jason. I cannot stand hearing people say, do you think they'll find her? They know where she is. What do you mean find her? So Nesbitt told me in North Carolina, she said, Maria, we know where everyone is, because I couldn't believe they found me, because I'd been hiding and I'd moved so much and I didn't have my name on anything. And I had no relationship to that property, but they knew exactly where I was. I didn't have a cell phone. I didn't have a bank account, but they knew exactly where I was. And she laughed and thought that was funny. She's like, we know where everybody is. Yeah. They're lying. They're lying. And they're lying because they're covering their assets. That's what I think.
I think you're 100% right. I mean, all right, so you look at the New York indictment. Before we even get there, you know, you talk about the media bringing out. No, it was really Bradley Edwards, who was representing these victims, being sued by Epstein in Epstein's attempt to have him disbarred. Then a countersuit occurs. Finally, 9+ years later, one of the judge is just like, what the fuck is going on here? We're going to have the trial finally. On the day they go to pick the jury, what happens? Epstein concedes to Bradley Edwards in a written statement that he never broke the law, that everything he did was legal, that he was acting on behalf of the victims, he never perjured himself, etc. I've read it on air. They do a press conference with literally what looked like tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of documents behind them. The only reason he did this because he didn't want a jury picked. He didn't want this out. And then it still took another 7 to 8 months before they enacted anything via New York and their district attorney, Berman. Now, then that happens, and Epstein doesn't kill himself twice. The only person at MCC to commit suicide in the past 13 to 14 years. He's number 2. It took 13, 14 years for another person to successfully commit suicide.
He didn't kill himself. Okay, so I knew him really well. This is the thing that really bugs me. I knew him really well. He was a narcissist. Narcissists rarely take their own lives. The other thing about Epstein that people don't get, like people have said to me, well, maybe he was uncomfortable. He was used to a mansion. The guy grew up in Coney Island, okay? And he didn't have money growing up. And he told me one day, he goes, see all this amazing stuff? I got it all for $1. Sorry about my dogs. Brady,
no, you're fine.
He goes, I got it all for $1 from Wexner. And he said, I don't need any of it, and I could live in a tent. And I actually believed him, because the weird part is he was so strange. He was like a homeless man in the way he dressed, right? And he laid around upstairs all day getting massages, he said, 3 a day. So This guy would have never taken his own life. I just promise you that. It's not, how dumb do they expect us to be, Berman? Really? I want him to prove he's not a deep state creeper. And I'm tired of the lies. I've waited half my life.
Yeah, I agree. And everybody that thinks Bill Barr is going to save them, I've told people, look, Bill Barr, career CIA, literally, while in the CIA, got his law degree.
So disgusting. Yeah, I can't even.
Yeah, and
he's so disgusting.
Yeah.
And I had heard that he was leaving the building. Who goes to the MC? He was leaving the building the first time that the thing happened.
Well, there is that. I mean, we reported on that as well. There was the reports that he had visited. They were unconfirmed reports to MCC prior to the first incident.
I got a report from a really good source, and it's not, I promise you.
Again, Nicholas Tartiglione, a ex-cop who allegedly executed 4 people in upstate New York, is put as his cellmate. Mark Epstein.
They couldn't ask for a better cellmate.
Yeah, Mark Epstein, his brother, swears that Jeffrey told him he did not try to commit suicide and that he was attacked by Tartiglione. Tartiglione also was able to smuggle in what they described as a miniature cell phone into that cell weeks before they found him with that. And I mean, it's over the top. It's over the top. They act like
in my opinion, Barr's like, hey, why don't you take Jeffrey out? And the guy's like, okay. I mean, it's really simple. With all this stuff, it's really not as complicated as people think. These people are doing the bidding for Israel, and they're compromising government people. And it was really obvious by the people I saw coming and going.
So let's get to Wexner's role, okay? I mean, I want to talk about a lot of the names here. You've talked about Ivana Trump. You've talked about Wexner in particular as being the head of the snake. Most people see Les Wexner as just the L Brands and Victoria's Secret guy, and that's just a small part of his operation. The Wexner Foundation alone, which basically is this think tank that writes policy papers on behalf of Israel and their best interests, should give people a clue into what they were actually about. So tell us about Les Wexner and your experiences.
Okay, so I never met him, and I never physically met Abigail. I want to be really clear about that, because I've only spoken to Abigail on the phone because I needed her permission to go outside when I was on her property. But I was also greeted by her as far as a phone call when I arrived. But I had not really heard anything about them ever in my life. I didn't care about them, and I never shopped at those stores. I thought they had the cheesiest stuff. I just thought they were just gross. And in fact, when I started working for Jeffrey, he really wanted me to go to all these stores. And there was just nothing in there. Everything was so itchy and cheap and gross, made in China crap, you know? And I was like, I'd just rather get thrift store clothes. It's all worn in. It's really cheap, you know? And he's like, no, you need these things for work. And he took me, and I was so not excited about, you know, buying clothes there. But this was the thing Jeffrey did. Like, whenever someone worked for him, he would take them on shopping sprees. And it was supposed to be really exciting. But anyway, my first time hearing about him was on this first shopping trip. I heard about Les Wexner, and Jeffrey was saying he was his only client.
Exactly. All right. So one client, a man that sells him a mansion that you work in for $1. $1.
Not just that mansion. Let me be really clear, because people don't say this, because of course all the mainstream media are protecting this man, because he'll sue them or something. Anyway, so here's the first place Jeffrey showed me. He showed me these himself, so I know this is true. The first mansion that Jeffrey lived in that I went to was in the 60s, not the 66th Street apartment buildings where the Victoria's Secret flagship store is that his brother now owns. Not those, because I decorated those. Not those. This was the first townhouse he had on the east side, and it was really exquisite. That's where my sister, unfortunately, first met Jeffrey. And it was just a beautiful townhouse that later became Gillian's townhouse, because these people would swap properties all the time. I think it's called money laundering. But anyway, not sure. But it seems like money laundering if you look at the records. So they were always switching houses around. And the second house so Jeffrey told me very clearly, Wexner gave him that for $1. Okay. Then I went to his Palm Beach mansion. Gosh darn it, Wexner gave him that one. That's weird. And then he told me that he gave him the place on 71st Street for $1. Yeah. And then before it was time for me to go to the New Albany estate, he said, Abigail Wexner is very excited for you to be here because they have Wexner Center of the Arts. And I really thought this was going to be an opportunity for me to connect with people who honestly supported real artists, not people who pretended and bought Picassos so they would look important. I thought these were real supporters of the arts, and I was wrong. These people, according to, Guylaine and Jeffrey, are very interested in helping people. This is what I was told. You can't get any kind of scholarship because they only give scholarships to Jewish students or Israelis. This is like the thing that they set up all these foundations, he said. And I don't remember any details, but I was like, oh, that would be great if I could get one of those. And he said, no, you're not Jewish. You can't have one of those. But you can stay as basically a prisoner on their estate. That was what I was offered. But I wasn't told that. I was told it was going to be a great opportunity and I would have all this light. This is the first studio I've ever had with light, ever in my life. I've always painted in the dark, and I had to paint in the dark there. Yeah.
Oh, so Wexner and his business relations with Epstein obviously are very obscured, right? But within this mansion, you've stated that you saw not only that they had these rooms bugged and they were recording there, but that there was actually people watching these live as it happened.
Oh, yeah. So if you're facing the mansion, on the right-hand side is a barred window. And right behind that is what Jeffrey called the media room. And I asked him if I could see it. And it was like my first day working there. And he said, sure. And he just brought me in. And he was very proud of it. And he said, all those pinhole cameras I showed you next to the desk where you're going to be sitting? He said, all that's fed into this room. And he said, it's leaded. And there were like 4 guys sitting there. And it was the old kind of like TVs, monitors, stacked up. And I remember looking at them going, oh my gosh, that's a bathroom. Wait a minute, that's a bedroom. Wait a minute, this is weird. It wasn't like they were showing normals. I mean, they're everywhere, these pinhole cameras. But these men were watching these very specific, and there were men sitting there working all day in this leaded room. Yeah, and these pinhole cameras, by the way, Jeffrey told me. I said, gosh, isn't that expensive to do this? And he said, oh no, Wexner does all this. He outfits everything before I get it, so.
Oh, and that's largely been
Nightmare.
ignored. We've talked about that, but just the fact that these were manned right there. And do you think they were manned 24 hours a day?
I do.
And all right, so that right there, if you saw 4 people, 24 hours a day, 8-hour shifts, you've got at least 12 employees for some period of time. These are eyewitnesses to these crimes again and again and again. And you would again think, you told that to the FBI, there would be a paper trail as to whom these gentlemen were, and then they would have to turn state or federal witness. Never even a thought from the FBI, correct?
No, nothing like that. Nothing. Of course not. No. This is the biggest scam I've ever endured, and I'm sick of it. I'm telling you right now, they have no intention of bringing us justice, so we're going to have to bring it for ourselves. We are. That's why I'm speaking out with 2 kinds of cancer. Shame on Berman.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that Ghislaine Maxwell is being protected. And I'll be honest, when they arrested Jeffrey Epstein, I was blown away. I couldn't believe it. It was one of those moments. I was in my living room with my brother. We were watching a UFC pay-per-view, and I had to go live just because I was like, wow, maybe there will be some justice. And I'm like, maybe we're gonna get a little bit.
Did you know that my sister and I knew? Because I was interviewed, the NYPD SVU were the guys making this arrest, if you want to know. They're the ones who did all the work. This guy, Detective Phelan, has been working on getting Jeffrey for a while, just like Nesbitt Kirkendall. But he had to hand it over to the FBI because, they're the heroes. So they were kind of sad to tell me we had to hand this over to the FBI. This is not a good situation, Maria. Yeah. They knew. It's like NYPD. I'm not putting words in their mouth, but they indicated to me that they knew the FBI was up to something. Because right in front to my lawyers, Detective Phelan said, why are they not talking to Maria? David Boies is like, that's a good question. Yeah, Berman, what is that about? Plus, they've been abusive to me. I want to mention the abuse, the systemic FBI abuse, okay? So it's like they've chosen one victim that they want to Virginia, and they've used her to try to say, oh, look, we're helping the victims, and they've called her in and interviewed her, and they're going to help her with the prints. I don't believe a thing of it. I don't think they're going to help her, and they better help her, but I don't believe they're going to help any of us. And I want them to prove me wrong. I would be delighted. But after waiting half of my life for justice, I don't believe them anymore. Mm-mm. And I'll tell you something. They've avoided me. They've avoided the other victims. They don't want to talk to us. Okay. And I can't speak for all the victims, but I know a handful of them that they won't talk to. And they don't want to, they don't want any information or any evidence. What is the problem? What's going on here, Jason?
Well, I gotta wonder, especially with the news out yesterday. They're saying that there is going to be an estate payout of $100 million to 61 of these victims. This is also going to.
Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it. I'll believe that when I see it. That sounds like a really big number, and I'm not buying it for 5 seconds. I don't believe that. I've been told a very paltry sum for myself to prepare me. I mean, the most paltry thing you can imagine, like less than they've raised for me, basically. So, I mean, I just don't believe it. And I've seen no justice in this. I've never tried to sue. And I didn't sue because I was in hiding, right? But when I tried to finally reach out, I reached out to Gloria Allscombe.
And what did she?
She shamed me. Her assistant shamed me. Her assistant was and now she's representing someone who might have met him once and recorded it. And she claims he might have touched her hip. But she ran out screaming and called her lawyer. And she goes on TV, she goes on Fox News and pretends to be me and says, I was the first to report this. I'm like, are you kidding me? No, you weren't. No, you weren't. Go away. Put on your pants. You need to cover your bottom. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of unpleasant parts to this, and that's Gloria Allred's claim. But she shamed me. That's interesting. I find that very interesting. She and her daughter are scumbags.
I mean, I've never trusted Gloria Allred, and I don't think that people should. I know she's been propped up.
I mean, that girl, wow, she's a real winner. I mean, you should read some of the stuff that comes out of the New York Times about her with Harvey Weinstein. Yeah, it's one big group.
And Weinstein obviously connected to Epstein, and that also comes out. And I want to talk about Trump for a second.
I can say something about that really fast.
Sure.
I know they were connected back in 1995 because when I first went to the offices and one day with Ghislaine, it was the first time I'd been in there with her. And there was Katie Ford in there, and she wanted to introduce me, and she wanted to tell me that my sister could model for Katie Ford. And so Katie Ford was one of these people who was part of this. And her husband, Andre Balazs, he was always at the New York Academy of Art hanging out with Eileen Guggenheim for the Academy Guggenheim. And so what's amazing is after I said my sister doesn't want to model, Annie wants to go to medical school, she said, well, I could just call my friend Harvey then, and she could be an actress. Like, Ghislaine did not listen, and she didn't understand that people weren't servants.
Well, I mean, I'm sure they felt like they owned people, and I mean,
yes,
you know, they once these people have so much, they don't even look at you like a human being, and that's why when I talk about the predator class, I'm like, guys, you don't understand. They don't care if you're a liberal. They don't care if you're a conservative. It doesn't matter. You can
use anything against you. Like I've gotten messages from a couple of the girls that they were like shamed half to death for being Catholic. Yeah. I mean, it's just, there's no end to the abuse. I was starved, and so was another girl I know, because I had breasts. And so they didn't want me to have those because that made me look not nubile. It's hard to understand, but back then I looked super young. So that was why, another reason why Eileen was feeding me to him. And it's very clear now.
So let's talk about Trump for a second.
Okay.
You talked not only about meeting him, but in '96, I would assume, I think he was separated or divorced from Ivana. But
I have kind of funny story about this. I haven't told anyone.
Please.
This is a side thing, but I've only had one other job in my life other than Epstein, and then I ran into hiding. But my first job was at LaBeouf Green Livy McRae. It was like a law firm, and I was so bad at the job, like all the clerical stuff, they couldn't find anything for me to do. So they would literally send me down to the records department and let me read like cases. And so I read the divorce case between them when that was going on. And I found out weird stuff, but I wasn't, whatever. But so but I didn't know, I thought he was a game show host. So when I reported him to the FBI, I said, that game show host Donald Trump, he was also there. And they were like, the game show, you mean, okay. Anyway, yeah. So he was so cheesy. And, all these people, that was the other thing. They were all just so cheesy. But yeah, I met Donald Trump at Jeffrey Epstein's office. It was like, I'd been working there just a few days, and it was nighttime, and Jeffrey called me to come up there, and I had to jog because I was broke. And so I'm wearing my jogging pants, and I'm super skinny, but my legs are exposed because, I'm wearing pants that, shorts, running shorts. And Donald Trump walks in. It's 9 o'clock at night. It's a dark office. Epstein's in his part of the office, and Donald Trump walks in, and I'm seated right here. And he walks in and leans against this wall, and he's just looking at my legs like they're his lunch. And honestly, I was just a really average-looking person. I'm like, a normal person in art school. I'm thinking, what is this? Is the grossest guy? And he's like, kind of, like looking at me like, hey, laughing. And I made the ugliest face. I went, and Epstein walked in. And Epstein goes, no, she's not here for you. Like whispers it to him, she's not here for you. And he escorts Trump to this other room.
Oh.
Who was in there? I don't know. I don't know if anyone was in there, but I thought that was really creepy. She's not here for you. Here, go in here a minute. I don't know if he had him wait until our meeting was over. Honestly, I don't know. But that was my first encounter with him. It was very unpleasant. I told everyone always that game show host Donald Trump made me feel like I was his lunch or dinner,
Now, you've talked about Ivana and Ghislaine being like buddy and actually
they were
recruiting
very good
girls.
friends. Very, very good friends. So here's what happened. I figured out, like in the divorce, I guess, Jeffrey got Donald and Ghislaine got Ivana because they were always around. This is in 1995. I would love for them to deny it because it's a fact and there are lots of pictures. Yeah.
Well, a lot of people don't understand how involved she was in his business. She was in the offices. She was very much involved in Trump Towers and all that stuff. So it wasn't like she was just on his arm. She was actually trying to make herself part of this dynasty at the time. So it doesn't surprise me. When I first started covering this, so many people wanted to be in denial that Trump had anything to do with him. But if you read James Patterson's Filthy Rich, it was apparent that they had a relationship, whether they had a falling out later or not. And if you had looked at some of the media out there earlier than, I think, 2010, he was calling him a great guy and telling him he broke the cardinal rule by being late to go on his plane with his current wife right now, Melania. And people would discount that. But it's not discountable. You've talked about several people who Epstein was in business with other than Wexner, where he made his money. Tell us about that.
People where he made his money? I thought, to me, I think the only people he told me his only client was Les Wexner.
So he wasn't in business with Trump and Gates? Because it seems like he...
Yes. But I didn't know about that.
No, not at the time. It was until later?
I didn't know about that. I did know that I overheard them talking about Gates like he was one of their buddies in 1995, right? So, and the only reason I paid attention is because I had gone to school in the Silicon Valley when it was first opening up at this little school, Santa Clara University, and it was right on our campus. The whole Silicon Valley exploded. And so I always heard about Bill Gates, like everyone worshipped him, like he was just this god or something. And so when I heard the name, I thought, wow, they really do know these powerful people. This is a little bit scary, right? I think my phone's ringing. Sorry. Yeah. So turn it off here.
So let's also talk about the other women that basically said to you that they were kidnapped. We know that Nadia Marcinkova allegedly, as the filings, was somebody that Jeffrey Epstein apparently was bragging about that he'd bought as a 12-year-old girl.
Yeah, I want to speak to that because I know I wasn't assaulted by her, so I can't really say, but I feel like she's a victim. I feel like anybody who's been stolen as a child is a victim. And I can tell you right now, none of those other co-conspirators are victims. And I even had Vicky Ward reach out to me and scold me on Instagram and say, I'm an Epstein victim and you're very rude. And yeah, she's horrible and vicious. And I'm going to tell you, she's a gold digger, in my opinion. She's a gold digger who did not care about me one bit and my whole family. And Ghislaine told me when she called to threaten my life, she said, Vicky Ward spilled the beans, honey, You called the FBI. And so I had to move to South Carolina in the middle of the night from my place. from my home, and I had to leave like my boyfriend and all my friends, and I kept in touch with some people, but then there were like leaks, and Ghislaine would call me, and I literally had to get rid of everyone in my life at one point, and I had to change my name, and the FBI knew all this, and they would not give me witness protection. That's why I want people to know this guy Berman is a bad actor. He better do his job.
So let's talk about the help, because that's something that, was a revelation in your Whitney Webb interview, that you had talked to some of these maids at different estates, and they basically said that they were stolen.
They were stolen. Stolen.
I mean, how many people are we talking about?
These were the sweetest women. These were beautiful women. And what I think is that they were probably stolen as children and used sexually and then turned into maids. Because, I was used like a maid. So I was older. So they use the older ones as maids, like they're in their early 20s. And then, that's what I think. But they told me, okay, so I saw them in Florida, I saw them in New Mexico, and I saw them in New York.
How many times did you go to the New Mexico
Oh,
state?
and get Ghislaine's apartment. You can't make it up. Like, she had her own servants, right? And she was so unkind to these women. She would scream at them and then make them do her feet. Like, come do my feet. Rub my feet. And she had the grossest. Okay, this woman is really gross. I had to see where she hangs upside down for 45 minutes, she said, in Florida. It's like down a long hallway of nude pictures of children and Ghislaine. And senators and people, not senators nude, just like presidents and senators and all these friends have had theirs.
Bill
and
Richardson?
I want to tell you, that black book, do not ever speak. Everyone should just pretty much say, if they're in the black book, they're a problem. I've had 20 years to research it. It's a real problem, that black book. It's going to be a problem for them because these people think they're going to come back from this. And I think we're headed for a revolution. And I think that these people are going to be the first to be Frankenstein. That's my opinion. I think we need to get out our pitchforks.
I absolutely agree. And I was just asking how many times you'd been over to the New Mexico estate, especially because Bill Richardson, the New Mexico governor, one time.
I was only there once. I was there at the very beginning when he first bought it, and he had just restored it. And I'm sorry, he had just built some buildings. Like when Clinton went there, he stayed in the western town,
Yep.
So that was developed. I think Clinton had already probably stayed there at that point. But I don't know. But they had it was such a huge ranch, and they had weird buildings everywhere. Like they had a hospital and like a place for the ambulance and a fire station, and he had a police force, all of it. Just like Wexner's estates. Oh, wait a minute. I bet it was Wexner's estate. Ding, ding, ding. It's like, how obvious can they be with all this trading of properties? And how can he get out of this, that he's the one who funded a pedophile ring? Why isn't anyone arresting this man?
Well, because they've done a whitewash investigation.
Because the FBI's in on it. That's why.
Yeah. And they've exonerated him. I just want people to know they did an internal investigation into Wexner. They exonerated him, just like they did an internal investigation into the Sweetheart deal. And the judge said there wasn't a scintilla of evidence of any corruption.
Wait until they get our revolution deal.
Yeah.
Wait until that happens. Because I wouldn't want to be rich right now. I noticed that Elon Musk is claiming he's selling everything. And then he said he's giving up all worldly possessions. And then I looked it up. And he and his little satanic baby mommy are, they're listing the properties for like $500 million. What are you giving up exactly? Are you giving that money to veterans who are homeless? Because you should be. I mean, these people, if I were them, I'd be very, very afraid for the next few years. And that's why I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. I want people to know the truth about who's keeping us quarantined right now. These people are the same ones who are stealing the children.
Mm-hmm. And let's talk about that because, again, they've never even investigated New Mexico Ranch. There's been no raid whatsoever, and the fact that Zorro Ranch hasn't been investigated is very problematic to me because one of those people in that book is a woman named Courtney Love, and I spoke to her father, Hank Harrison. Now they've had a falling out for years, but right. Hank Harrison was very adamant that Courtney Love told her that not only were they trafficking children with her boyfriend at the time, and women, but the ones that got out of line basically were taken out into the desert and didn't come back.
Yeah. I'd like to say something to Courtney Love. Courtney Love, you're a POS. Why didn't you say anything? What is with these people? They think their names and their money means something now, and it actually means nothing. And if you're in that black book, you should probably be very, very careful, because people are someday going to hold you accountable. And that's not a threat, it's a promise. We're going to make the FBI do their job. I wanted to go RICO. I want Eileen Guggenheim in prison. Let me tell you about that witch. She took me to that estate, and she lied about it in an article. She thought she could just continue to lie, because that's what she does for a living. And I'm going to tell you, she forced me onto that estate with those people and made me sit through a creepy dinner party where we open the closet door and there's like a skeleton. And then we sit down and we're being handed like prosthetic breasts as our eyes are closed in a bag, in a paper bag. It was all supposed to be so fun. And it was really creepy. And she wanted me, she instructed me to go sit on Jeffrey's lap and flirt and make him happy for the academy, Right? I mean, who does this? And my sister brought up a good point. She said, I didn't think it was that horrible. I never really thought it was that extra egregious until I went to graduate school. And then I realized that you don't use your students as servants and as your babysitter, and you don't sell them to people for money, for donations, and you don't trade them. You actually don't do that if you're a dean, a real dean, at a real school. That's not a real school. They shamed me. They shamed me for being 25 years old when I graduated. I'm the youngest graduate they've ever had, and when it was matriculated. I know Randy, I think, was a little younger, but it wasn't matriculated. But I'm the youngest graduate they've ever had, and they're shaming me because I was so old when I graduated. I should have known better.
Let's talk about Dershowitz for a minute, because that's what really prompted you to get back out there and tell your story, and how I became familiar with you because of the legal battles between Dershowitz and Virginia Giuffre Roberts. And you basically contradicted his official version of who he was in Jeffrey Epstein's life. Barely knew him, not really that friendly with him, just did some law work.
I reported him to authorities because I saw him coming and going, and he wants to eviscerate me for that. This man, he would sue me with 2 kinds of cancer. He's suing Virginia right now. What does that tell you about this guy, right? So I can't say too much about him other than the fact that I've already told the authorities about him, and they did nothing. And that lets me know that he's part of it. It's all one big cabal of losers. And I'm telling you right now, I really think that they're going to shrivel up, and their little toes and legs are going to shrivel up, just like in The Wizard of Oz, very soon. I honestly do. I don't think they could sustain the power of love that the victims have for each other. And I think that people are going to, I mean, like I said, a revolution. I think we're going to have a revolution.
Well, I certainly hope we do, but because, again, this is a guy... This is a guy that says, oh, I got one massage on the island once from an overage woman and I kept my underwear on, yet you were working the door in the 90s at Epstein's New York estate, where you were seeing underage models coming and going all the time. And then this gentleman...
Uniforms. Yeah, with braces. Right. Models.
Models, yeah. And you would see this guy come in, go upstairs, do whatever he was doing, leave like it was no thing, and go on about his day.
Yeah, that's the other thing I want to go to. They all use the Rothschilds as like a threat. They're like, oh, well, I know this Rothschild woman, and she's the one who gave me as a present through Wexner as a gift that spring, 2 weeks after you quit, Maria. So it's not possible. And I'm like, who's this creepy woman that gives men as gifts? And why does Wexner give a gift to Epstein of a human being every year? And what do they think human beings are? Possessions? Because it felt like it. And I think that the whole thing, Jason, the whole thing wouldn't have happened if the FBI wasn't crooked. Bottom line. If the FBI wasn't crooked, Louis Frey is his name. Yep. He's a lawyer in the private sector. Everyone write him a letter. Ask him why he did nothing. He's accountable for this. Write to Vicky Ward at CNN and say, hey, lady, why didn't you do anything? She sat on it for 18 years, and she lies and said I didn't have the sources, and I did. And she put our lives in jeopardy. What's her excuse for telling Ghislaine over drinks that I reported them to the FBI? That's not a journalist. That's a terrorist, okay? She's an emotional terrorist, and she emotionally terrorizes me, and she sent me a card here to let me know that she knows where I live. And she's still friends with Ghislaine. I'll bet you anything. So I'm not safe. And the FBI does not care how many forms of cancer, how many things happen to all of us. They don't care. And they need to prove that they care. Quickly. They need to prove it.
Well, like you said, there are people that really need to go down in this thing, and somebody
Rico.
whose name is not as prominent out there as Ghislaine Maxwell, because by now everybody knows that she was Epstein's pimp, if you can call it that.
Right.
She could really pimp out children. You know, she was basically
Absolutely. I'm going
his
to move this a little bit because I
co-conspirator.
have to sit back. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. But Sarah Kellen is another
Right.
name that people are not quite as familiar with. Why don't you tell us about that?
Okay. I hate her almost the most. She became, so when Ghislaine left, Sarah Kellen sprouted in her place. A new monster sprouted up. And Sarah Kellen, here, I have to put it down, sorry.
Yep.
So Sarah Kellen basically fed children to Jeffrey Epstein for 10 years, and it's all on papers. And the FBI has all the proof of it. And they're like, well, that would be too easy to just go for Sarah Kellen. So we need, all of them.
I mean, we had this discussion kind of privately, but in that New York case, you have the 3 Jane Does that turned state's witness. You suspect that there's a possibility one of them's Nadia Marcinkova. You don't think that
I
one
really
of them...
hope so, because she's the only one I could stand to have any kind of relief, because that girl deserves relief. She was stolen at 12. She was soul trafficked by her parents. That's trauma. I'm sorry. I know she hurt children. I'm really sorry about that. But listen, it's this girl. If anybody needs to be forgiven, it's that one, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally understand. I don't think people get that.
She's beautiful too. She was beautiful, and I think she had so much promise, and it was all stolen again. It was stolen from her.
Who do you think are the other players that need to have more light shown on their darkness?
Leslie Groff. Boy, would I like to stick it to her. I wish I could pitchfork her in the face. Wouldn't that be great if they'd make that legal? I mean, that would be wonderful. You could go get the co-conspirators with a pitchfork. Anyway, Leslie Groff, I saw the other day that she was doing hot yoga in Houston, I think. I think it was Houston. Anyway, and she was out, in her little fit body, and she's hideous. Her face is so ugly. And I'm like, you are the grossest person. And the problem with her is I remember seeing her, and I hate her so much, and I want her to be arrested. And she's part of it. And, oh, God, I mean, really the worst is Sarah Kellen, obviously, and Leslie Groff, to me. But, I'm not one that was regularly assaulted, so those girls would have to speak to that.
How many of these documents do you think we're going to see? We saw only 2,000 pages.
All of them.
I hope we do too. I mean, my goodness, I've been waiting forever.
The reason I did this campaign while I'm sick, I'm sorry, I'm deaf in one ear, so I overtalk people sometimes.
Fine.
But that's how I found out I had a brain tumor, because I lost my hearing here. But that was this year. This has been a great year, Murder Epstein. Thanks, Berman. Gonna do anything else? Oh, you're promoting Julie Brown. That's right. Oh, yuck. It's like you can't make up how much they're in this together. I'm so sick of it. Mm-hmm. And I wanted everyone to know before all these documents are released, I wanted to back it up that these are bad actors. And listen, I never sued, Jason. I never sued. I just went into hiding. I reported it to all the right authorities. I did everything you're supposed to do in a case like this. I was never provided protection. I provided myself my own protection in the woods. I couldn't have relationships because no one would believe me. I couldn't go to a therapist because I was afraid I would be put in a mental institution for some of the things I know. I haven't revealed a lot of what I believe and what I know. And I'm going to tell you that it's a very painful, lonely journey. And the FBI owes all those girls who were brutally raped and harmed and damaged and murdered, most likely, because I don't know where they are. They owe us more than an apology. They needed to be dismantled.
I agree. And, one of the things is only, maybe 10% of the victims ever even speak up, those that do survive. And for those people like yourself to be shamed and have, basically the intelligence apparatus work against you when they admit to you that they know where everybody is.
Half my life I've been fighting the FBI. Half my life. And they knew that I rode all the way to New York, 2,000 miles with Jim Hill from ABC. And Jim drives me all the way there. He's a friend. And he drives me all the way there. And we get there and they're like, oh, we're not going to interview Maria. We're just going to interview your sister and everyone else, but not Maria. And then I have proof of someone else who's been trying to give them evidence for a while and they just won't take it. And I just think that I don't know. I got there, and also ABC News then. I was going to go on TV because Savannah Guthrie, who I think that's the most hillbilly name. I just have to say that. Savannah Guthrie. So Savannah Guthrie, I cannot stand her, stood there and to a child who's been traumatized, Virginia Roberts, and looked at her and said, why did no one ever say anything? Why didn't a single person ever report this? Because no one did. No one did, Virginia. No one. And I'm going, I'm not a no one. Bitch. I'm so mad, you know? I'm like, I am not a no one, Savannah Hillbilly Guthrie. I'm actually a person that counts. And you know what? So David was furious, David Boyce. And he said, we're going to go. That's why I went on this trek. We're going to go, when you interview with the FBI, we're going to go on, I mean, it's a horrible show, The View, right? So cheesy. But it was about showing solidarity and showing the truth and showing that Savannah Guthrie was out of line by lying about that. We wanted to clear the record. So we're driving in, and I can see the buildings, and the producer's talking to me, and she's like on the phone, and she says, okay, what are you going to talk about tomorrow with David? And I said, well, obviously, first thing I want to do is talk about Wexner. And she goes, okay, you need to hand the phone to Jim. We're not doing this interview. It's over. You're not talking about Wexner. So I went to New York for no reason. And then I had to ride home, and the day I got home, my dog died. And I was like, I am not going to forgive these people. It's like one thing after another, right? And I want to tell you another thing that was crazy that happened to me this year, this calendar year. Found out I had a brain tumor. So then after they did the radiation, they went in to check like how well it worked and everything. And they did this wire thing down my throat. And they were like, oh my God, your voice box. You were like, that tumor was 2 weeks away from taking your voice away forever. That was one thing, right? The second thing was I had to go in for thoracic surgery because then they did a scan. And they were like, that's weird. Your PET scan's lighting up all around your heart. So we have to go in there now, break a rib, deflate a lung, crack it open. This is right after Epstein's been murdered, you know? And I'm like, well, this is going to be fun. So they go in and they're like, yeah, we didn't find anything. We found all these tumors, but we don't know what they are. Something's happening. I know why. I was taking RSO. So anyway.
You think, oh, you don't like the Rick Simpson oil?
No, I've been taking it.
That's you have
saving
been?
My life. Yeah. I was going to tell you, Jason.
Yeah, no, I've been.
It, and that's why the cancer was hiding. It's Hodgkin's in my chest. It's lymphoma. And it was hiding because of the Rick Simpson oil. Isn't that amazing? The doctors were amazed. So anyway, they couldn't find the cancer. And I almost never went back, which is really scary but I had this amazing team of doctors, like kind of superhero doctors. My brain tumor was so rare that they had someone fly from China. He was a physicist to build this cap for my radiation. And then they had another guy from like, I don't know, Australia or something. It was an amazing team. I was so honored to have these doctors. But then I had to go for the thoracic surgery. And when they're in there, when I wake up, my tongue's black and I can't speak. And I thought it was from the surgery. And I'm like, wait, and my mom goes, open your mouth, and it's the color of my sweater. And I'm like, oh, and she didn't tell me. But for about, there were a few months where it was really hard for me to speak. And she had cut off circulation. The anesthesiologist was a jerk, and she didn't pay attention. And she cut off the circulation on my tongue, and I almost lost my tongue, Jason. I almost lost my tongue.
God.
Then I knew I needed to talk. But even after that, I went to all the mainstream media came to me, right? I didn't go to anybody. They came to me. I was terrified to tell my story because of Vicky Ward, but they came to me and they promised they would show my story. And only one man honored his promise, and that was Anthony Mason. And he came to show the art. He didn't say he was going to talk about anything else. And that whole team on the CBS Morning News, they are a class act, I want to tell you. It's like Gayle King, Anthony Mason, and this girl Sarah, who's their producer, is just like an angel. And so that's why they're such a good group over there. Mm-hmm. But everyone else was abusive, and I don't mean Jim, but everybody else at his network sucks. Okay, they didn't air Virginia's interview, and so I didn't even know all about what she'd been going through. You know, I didn't know because they didn't air it. I needed to know those things. And everybody deserved to know. And she deserved to get her story out then. But that didn't happen. So there's just been all this abuse on so many levels from people like Julie Brown. I am a hero. And every time I see her, I'm like, oh, you're not a hero. You're you just won yourself an award, and you got yourself on the cover of People, and you got yourself over $1 million. What are you going to do for Courtney? I'm just curious. This isn't Courtney's words. This is my opinion. Courtney's a waitress. You going to help her? Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, of course not. It's rhetorical.
Let's talk, I do want to point out that CBS also was maybe at the forefront of trying to hold R. Kelly accountable as well, another
Yeah,
abuser
yeah.
of children, whereas the rest
They
of
were
the
actually
media
were
seemed to
really
be,
very honorable. I couldn't believe it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
I
I
mean,
think that's
Anthony
important.
Mason is like, Anthony Mason is actually a really good human being. He's a really decent human being who cares about artists and he promotes artists all the time. He cares about musicians. He cares about, so he's just this lovely human floating there. And then Gail is like amazing. And then Sarah makes the whole show amazing. But yeah, CBS is amazing. But the other networks have been very hurtful, very hurtful. Let me tell you something about Fox News. They had that girl that doesn't wear pants on, and she's tells my story all the time. And she says she's an Epstein victim, and she met him once for 5 minutes, and he might have touched her hip or something. I'm not sure, but then she recorded it for her lawyer, and Gloria Allred represents her. And I don't appreciate her pretending to be me and tell my story. I don't appreciate it. So I also wanted to come out and make that very clear that I wear pants.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing is that your story involves the Wexner estate, something
It
they
also
don't
involves
want mentioned.
Her story doesn't involve Wexner. It
Yeah.
might involve Epstein. I'm not sure. I don't know what to believe, honestly. And that would be the one person I have a lot of questions about, because she loves to tell my story, and she loves to get airtime by telling my story, by saying, I tried to protect all the girls in Florida. I didn't know there were girls in Florida. How would she have known? I'm the one who went to the FBI, and they told me that I'm the only one, and that's why I was going to have to testify. And so I'm tired of this game that everybody plays about the truth. They're having problems with the truth. And, if it's that girl that doesn't wear pants and she wants to be famous, could she maybe do it another way? Because it's really gross to do it this way. And if it's Gloria Allred, who's grandstanding on the steps to beg for victims after denying victims, right? And then she's probably re-victimizing her victims. So she's all about money. And that's what's so gross. Vicky Ward, Gloria Allred, Alan Dershowitz. I mean, these people are just the seediest money grubbers. And so we have that level of abuse too. And they're all doing the bidding, like the networks and everything are doing the bidding for these people.
So where does this go legally now? I know that we have the Women Against the Estate, and we have the ongoing Virginia Giuffre Roberts, Ghislaine Maxwell, Dershowitz legal battles that are out there. What else is out there, and what are we going to see moving forward?
I can't really talk about, things that are coming out. I know that I would like to testify in front of Congress, because I would like to change the statute of limitations. Because one thing that happened to me through this whole experience is people are so hateful about the fact that I was 25 years old when I was assaulted. And I would like to say that it shouldn't matter. I mean, it's horrible when children are assaulted, but it's also horrible to be a very naive young woman who's just gotten out of graduate school, whose dean just sent you to an estate where you think you're doing a project for a movie, which you do, but then you're not allowed to finish it. I mean, you're not allowed to give it to the director because you're held captive, And so I want to change the statute of limitations to say that it matters that I was held captive. It shouldn't matter what age I was. I was trafficked. It matters. And, there was a woman, consider the source, from Christina Oxenberg. And she released a statement recently. She was buddy with Ghislaine Maxwell. Okay.
Really?
Oh, yes.
Now,
She's
is
in
that the one is that the soap opera actress whose daughter was
No.
taken in an Nexium? Okay. All right.
Oh,
Woo!
maybe. I don't know. I just saw her around.
Okay.
And I'm going to tell you something. She is disgusting, and she's part of it. And she sent a thing out, like, we care about her opinion. She can just go in the corner and go away forever. Okay. But this was what she wrote. She wrote, I think my friend Ghislaine Maxwell is bat, S-H-I-T, crazy, or something like that. So, but what I've heard is it's actually Christina Oxenberg that's quite crazy as well. That's her reputation. But anyway, so she said, I feel that, even though Ghislaine Maxwell, this is a tweet, you can look at the actual tweet, but it indicates that, or she says very clearly, that the people who were children when they were assaulted by her batshit crazy friend, Ghislaine Maxwell, deserve compensation. Those who were underage. That's a way of hurting us again.
The whole thing
Lay
is disturbing and
off,
disgusting.
elite reptiles. Just go away,
Well, we're gonna have to fight them tooth and nail all the way, and you've been at the forefront of that for the last year plus, and I can only commend you. And I can't imagine how difficult this whole process has been and continues to be, especially under the medical duress that you have. I want to remind people one more time, please, I'm putting it into the live chat, to please donate right now to Maria Farmer. Folks, I mean, if you can't empathize and sympathize with a woman that's gone through so much, that did try to go to the authorities in the 90s, before I graduated high school, guys. I mean, my God.
Think about this. Virginia was in diapers when I reported it. Think about that. That's sick. This FBI owes everybody such an apology, and then they need to just go away forever. Yeah.
No,
but yeah,
that's. I agree. I agree. Listen, all these people that think that the deep state is a new thing, or that the media has just gotten bad into fake news, I got news for you. These people have been the cover-up crew for a very, very long time. For not an elite class, because there's nothing fucking elite about them. For the predator class.
Nothing elite. I call them the C-tiles. I actually have a good friend that is a friend I met through that New York Times article. He's just a man who has some health problems, and we communicate a lot. He's elderly, and he gets lonely, and so he writes these books, and he just wrote a book about them called The C-tiles. So I asked him if I could use the name for the drawing, and so.
And it's an awesome piece of art.
I think that's much more appropriate.
Are you selling that?
Yeah. What I'm going to do, though, is I want to make posters of it. And I want to give, posters to all the people who've interviewed me and things like that. But I also wanted to make it so that it's inexpensive, so people can have it, in their own house.
That's
awesome. Yeah.
No, that's awesome. I'm sure a lot of people would love that, Maria. Is there anything else that you want to get off your chest on this?
We should talk again, even if I've lost my hair, because I've really admired you, Jason. I want to say this. I've really admired you for a long time. And you have a great spirit. You're very intelligent. And you and Whitney Webb, and there have just been a handful of people that I've watched for a while. I watched Sean Atwood. I've watched a handful of people. And you guys, there's a reason why I've reached out to all of you guys, because you're really amazing. Well, Graham Elwood, too. He's great. I mean, it's just a small group that are telling the truth.
Thank you. Thank you. You're in it. I'm trying to tell the truth. Listen. That's the thing. The truth isn't about right or left. It's not about a political party.
It's not political, and it's not religious. People think it's like a religious thing, and that's all bullcrap. They use certain words against us to hold us hostage, but they're abusing everybody. These elites. I said this the other day, and it's like an uncomfortable truth, but it's the truth, and I have to say it because most of my friends are actually. I mean, I have a great deal of all my ex-boyfriends, for example, are Jewish, and most of my very good friends from New York. Yeah. And it comes from just where you've lived.
Yeah, I'm in New York. I know the same thing.
Like in the South, my friends are Baptists, but in New York, they were like secular Jews mostly, and so and also Catholic, which is what I was. So anyway, basically, I want to say this because it's not they're treading upon all of us, right? All the Jewish people, everyone. It's not that all Jewish people are elite. It's that all elites happen to be Jewish. And I find that really strange. I don't find that comfortable. I don't know what they're doing, these people. I think they've stolen someone's religion and they're using it. And it's hurting the people like my friends who are Jewish. It's hurting them,
Well, I know that, Ike has written that book, The Lion Sleeps No More. That's all about Rothschild Zionism and really about, a political goal and not a religion, and a political goal of dominance over the masses.
Because I have friends that are very devoutly, Jewish, and and none of my ex-boyfriends ever behaved the way these elites behave. There's something different about them. I'm telling you, it's genetic. There's something different with these elites, C-tiles. There's something different. Yeah.
The predator class is what I like to call them. Maria, again, we will do this.
Yes.
We will do this again. I 100% promise you. I want to thank you so much. And I'm hoping that by the next time we do this, there's not only better news for you medically, but there's better news in this case. And that we are pushing forward. Great. And we are holding them accountable.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you so much. You are the best. Maria Farmer, everybody. I've been looking forward to it forever. I'm going to be staying in touch with her. Again, I want to say it again. If you can donate to her GoFundMe, please do this. Please do this. Please do this. Please do this. Here you go. Right here, guys. Please do it. If you can support me, $5, $10, $15, it means the world to me. It keeps me going. You can see all my documentary films, Loose Change, Final Cut, Fabled Enemies, Invisible Empire, A New World Order to Find, and Shade the Motion Picture right here. I'm on rockfin.com as well. This weekend, I'm actually going to be on the Ben Askren channel, so go give Ben a follow as well. We're going to do a UFC wrap-up, but I'm doing 5 exclusives a week over here as well. We got big interviews coming up. I'm also on minds.com. Make sure to check me out there too. There's going to be some original content coming up, and I may even be doing some stuff with Iconic very, very shortly. Guys, I love you. Thank you so much. See you on the flip side.